Let's get ready to rumble!
Are you going to put in like a proper recording over that when you do this, make it all professional, right?
Yeah, maybe, or I might just leave that one.
So, welcome back to episode 2 of Boxing Unwrapped. I am Ryan.
And I am Andrew.
And this week, we are going to be talking about who the fuck regulates boxing. Because it is a bit of a murky world, and it's a bit complicated, and it's quite different from other popular sports.
It certainly is. I've been doing some extensive Wikipedia research on the subject, and the more you dig, the worse it appears to get in terms of opacity and corruption. But anyway, let's not let that put anyone off. And it is quite interesting to kind of delve into, and there are some quite interesting anecdotes that emerge from kind of looking into it a little bit further. Before I go into it, I do remember that I promised something to our now ridiculously massive following in the previous week.
Well, all 24 listeners from last week.
Oh yes. I mean, soon it will be hard to keep track of them all individually. But so if you remember in the last one, I'd flagged up a ridiculous tweet from a footballer. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, yeah.
So I should probably make good on my promise to mention it. So the tweet in question is from October of 2016. Victor Anichebe quotes, this is a quote he tweeted, "Can you tweet something like, 'Unbelievable support yesterday and great effort by the lads, hard result to take, but we go again.'"
It's class, man. It's class. It's absolute class.
I think your point was right though, that I think more currently there's a bit more of a sort of savvy approach, and they will maybe do some kind of sense checking before posting it. But I mean, it's I wonder whether the unbelievable support might feel a little bit affronted by his lack of effort, certainly in the tweeting stakes.
I think they might feel it was slightly disingenuous.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of recover from that, is it? Anyway, that one is not at all relevant, but we did say that we would review in this week's episode, so I did the extensive research to capture that one for our audio listeners' pleasure.
Well, if we are talking about our listeners, I would just like to highlight what SoundCloud says is our top follower,
right?
Which is Murray Deans. So thank you very much, Murray Deans, for following us and being our top listener.
Does that mean that he's listened to the highest percentage of the podcast without switching off, or he's listened to it multiple times?
I think so. I think that's probably it. Or it might mean that he has, like, I don't know, more SoundCloud clout than other people.
I should stop being cheeky then. Hi, Murray.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Please share. So, but nowadays, remember, guys, you can find us on iTunes as well. Search for Boxing Unwrapped, and please hit the subscribe button, because that would be very helpful. And share with your friends if they don't know anything about boxing and would like to know something about boxing from guys who don't know anything about boxing. That would be really, really helpful. Just to get our listener numbers up, and tell them the sound has improved this week, because we're fairly sure it might do.
It certainly hasn't got any worse. No, I think we'll be certainly on a roll with terms of sound quality. So hopefully people can get beyond the should we call last week a pilot?
We'll call it pilot.
We'll call it pilot episode. Pilot episode. Boom. Episode 1. Here we go.
Boom. This is episode 1 now.
With the software and the hardware upgrades.
It's upgraded. This is Welcome to Boxing Unwrapped 2.0.
This is going to be like a boy band or one of the pop bands, but like after 6 months there'll be nothing left of the original. They'll be like, Ryan and Andy won't be there anymore. It'll be two completely different, far more competent people hosting this podcast. There'll be nothing left apart from a vague boxing theme.
There'll be two guys that actually know about boxing.
That'll be so boring. So boring. They won't be on the journey with you listeners. Don't let it happen. Don't let the corporation take us down.
let's go on to our topic then, Andy.
We should.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically there are different governing bodies within the kind of world of boxing, and you'll have noticed that, or people will have heard that there's different belts. So there's different versions of the same belt within a weight class. So there's not like one heavyweight champion. There are multiple heavyweight champions, for example, and the differing bodies can all have their own belts to award. So why would we care about this? Well, each of the people who's got one of the belts can be claiming to be the world champion. There are also loads and loads of like non-world level belts, if you like, and this is a kind of whole like minefield, blah blah blah, but we'll go into that a bit more later. But basically we can talk about the main awarding bodies and what they're doing and so on. But the more you kind of delve into it, the more kind of grey and depressing a subject it actually appears to be.
Now you're winning people over by boxing with that exact statement.
I was thinking about this, and I think this is why a lot of people don't have an interest in boxing. And then I think a good analogy would be if you go into a charity shop, there's loads and loads of crap in it, and then occasionally you come across something that's like really, really good and really good value. And I think sometimes boxing's a bit like that.
Like a crap charity.
Boxing's a bit like a crap charity shop, where there's loads of like just dross that you have to wade through in terms of like the controversies, all the like drugs and blah blah blah, all the mismatches of fights, to occasionally get these kind of like golden nugget occasions which kind of then make it worthwhile. So I know that's a bit.
Do you know what I was thinking about actually when I was like researching this? If Sepp Blatter had a perfect sport, this would be it.
You think he's like a perfect fit?
He's a perfect fit. Like, he was in the wrong game.
Do you think maybe he's too honest for boxing?
Well, you know what? The case may be that he's just slightly too honest for boxing. Maybe they said to him. Maybe he tried.
Like, no. You're Mr. Integrity. We can't use you here. Okay.
All right. Okay.
So the original founding body is now the WBA, now known as the WBA. So it was founded in 1921 as the NBA, or National Boxing Association in the States, and it's now the WBA, which was founded in 1962 with a head office in Panama. So,
and we all know that Panama is known for its integrity. Nothing murky comes from Panama. That's a fact.
Do you know what? I don't know if this is totally irrelevant, but apparently, if you go backpacking around the world, the country you're most likely to be robbed violently in is Panama.
Well, you know, Pablo Escobar, when he fled Colombia, actually fled to Panama.
Really?
Yeah. So he was holed up in Panama for a very long time.
That's interesting.
When he was when he like had to flee Medellin, he went to Panama because like they couldn't touch him in Panama. That's how murky Panama is, actually.
That's interesting.
So very, very good to have like the largest boxing sanctioning body housed in such, a great place that's known for being incredibly above board.
Exactly. And as further illustration of that, we should say that they're the kind of original ones. So they still have, I guess, sometimes people talk about it as like, or they consider that to be like the most prestigious of the belts. So the WBA is the most prestigious. So if you're the WBA heavyweight champion, that's the most prestigious of the different heavyweight championship belts that you can hold. So that's because it's the original one, if you like. But they've obviously made lots of attempts to kind of muddy and murky the water in terms of their standing with this. So one of the things I should say is that, just kind of taking a step back, the reason it's important, or the reason that the fighters have to work with the different organizations, is they all publish and they all hold rankings. Okay, so to get in the position to be the person that gets to fight against the champion, you need to work your way up the rankings, and as it's supposed to be, you're supposed to get to the sort of number one slot in their rankings to then become a mandatory challenger to then face the champion. So you can't just go, oh well, these guys are like totally bent and there's nothing I can do about it. You have to kind of play the game in terms of trying to work your way through the rankings to then be able to get to the number one slot. Okay?
Yeah.
So this works across all the different awarding bodies. They all have this process effectively where they'll issue rankings, and fighters, when they win, in theory, they'll move up the rankings, and when they lose, they'll move down the rankings. The WBA, they have decided in their wisdom that they do a standard and a super version of each belt. So...
Okay, right.
So
can you only qualify for the super version if you have some sort of special power? if you flew into the ring instead of doing a typical ring walk?
You have to do like another skill, and it has to be like entertaining. Like, so for example, if you can juggle, you might be able to be the super champion, but if you can't, then you get the standard belt.
Well, I looked a little bit into this in terms of the different belts, right, that the WBA have, and they are kind of by far the worst, because if you don't know, listeners, they charge sanctioning fees for these belts. So you don't get a belt for free. You have to pay a percentage of your purse, which is your winnings, towards the sanctioning body in order for them to say, yes, you are the champion. And the WBA have made like quite a big business model out of this. So there are 17 divisions, weight classes in boxing where there could be a belt. And the WBA at the moment have 15 regular champions, 9 super champions, 4 interim champions, 2 undisputed champions, 1 unified champion, 10 Latin American champions, 9 North American champions, 6 Pan-African champions, 6 continental champions, 6 intercontinental champions, and 4 oceanic champions. Which goes to show... That's a lot of champions. It's a lot of champions. And, rather than having like a kind of straightforward 17 winners for your belts, you're actually creating more belts, which are perhaps meaning that you have more fees, which it's like saying, oh yeah, you've got the winner of the Premier League, but then you've got the super winner of the Premier League. And I think that really adds to like the murkiness of this sport, which upsets people and makes them a bit confused. Because you can be the world champion, but then above you, you've also got a super world champion, which is it's a bit murky at the very least. Like.
It's ridiculous, and if you look at the people that hold the standard ones, I mean, the simplest way to think of it is the super one is the super champion is the person who's their legitimate champion in that weight class, and the standard one is like some dude who's probably not as good. But somehow has come by this belt because they're paying the fees, etc., and they're fighting at like slightly lower level. So I think in the heavyweights, the standard champion is Manuel Char, who is like an also ran heavyweight. He's not like a high, like a top 10 fighter, but he's the standard champion. So the easiest way for people that are getting into it is you kind of go, super one is legitimate and standard one is kind of like, we'll kind of like not really, just don't really bother about it. Don't take it as meaning that that's a world class fighter.
They're kind of like, if you would think of your super champion as like the winner of the Premier League, your regular champion is like the winner of the SPL. So like they've won a league in their own right. They've definitely won a league, but it's just not at the standard that you're probably thinking a world champion would have.
We should probably.
I think that's a nice analogy.
It is, but it's probably worth clarifying that the SPL is the Scottish Premier League for all the non-Scottish football followers out there. I'm sure there aren't that many of you. Really. I mean, why would you not follow? it's spectacular after all. But in case you don't yet, so it's a few rungs down the ladder, shall we say?
Yeah.
The
it is indeed.
When I was looking at it, there's interesting stuff about all the awarding bodies and kind of how they conduct their business in inverted commas. But they all, I was saying about how they all like publish rankings about saying, these are the positionings of the different fighters. So I was looking through the WBA's ranking, and we'll come on to it a bit more later, how the different bodies do their ranking. But the number 2 ranked fighter I was looking at, and I was like, I've followed, boxing a bit. This is in the heavyweight division, which I know we're referring to a lot, but I think that's because people that are, if they're just getting into it, probably because they attract the most publicity, it's the easiest one for people to have reference to. So that's kind of like a way of an apology, but also an explanation to say the reason we're talking about heavyweight fighters a lot is because you might have, not in this case, but generally you might have heard of them.
Yeah.
Or even more, our listeners are going to more of a chance of having heard of them than if we were talking about, like bantamweights the whole time, and they'd be like, I don't know any of these guys, I don't care.
Exactly, because they don't even your kind of world champions in the lower weight divisions, they just don't garner as much press, even though they might be super duper fighters.
Exactly.
Even top fighters like Lomachenko, who is an absolute world beater, probably isn't. Well, he's definitely not as famous as Anthony Joshua.
No, but he's a more accomplished boxer.
100%. I think the guy's got like. From his amateur record, I think he's won like 320 fights.
Yeah, and in fairness, I think he lost like 2. So
yeah, so
and he apparently avenged them both as well. He's like, no, I'm not having that. You're not beating me. I've won 300 and whatever odd. I'm not having another go with you, pal. So,
totally.
So anyway, sorry, I know we're going off. The number 2 ranked fighter in the WBA is a guy called Frez Oquendo, which I'm sorry, I'm probably murdering the pronunciation of his name. He's Puerto Rican, and the interesting thing about him is he's established himself as a number 2 ranked fighter with the WBA, and I had to look him up to check on this. Would you like to have a guess at how old he is, Ryan? I take it you haven't heard of him either, by the way.
No, I've never heard of this guy. So I'm gonna guess that this guy is 37.
He is 45 years young.
You're kidding.
He's 45 years young, and I actually had to double check several times that this isn't the wrong person just who shares the name when I was doing the research on this, because it's so absurd. So, right, this is. Would you like to hazard a guess at when he last fought? To be considering he's ranked number 2, so he's saying they're saying that the number 2 ranked.
I would say he would have to have fought surely in the last 12 months.
His last fight was a majority decision loss in June of 2014.
Oh my god.
So you have to ask questions, don't you? Really? I mean, it's just absurd. I don't understand. I have checked this, and I've checked that this is the published rankings that they have as of the end of May of this year. He's ranked as the number 2 in the rankings, despite not having fought for 4 years and losing the last fight that he fought.
This is the same with a couple of the kind of sanctioning bodies, but there is a big argument about there being a heavy sway to Latin American fighters, because they are quite often based in that area. There's a kind of tilt towards them, so they let them get away with stuff because if he was ranked number 1, i.e. he had a belt, he would be pushed for mandatory fights quite often, which means he has to fight someone who's up and coming, or he gets stripped of his title. So to not have fought in that length of time and still be ranked number 2, it's unreal. How would you be ranked in other sports and not have performed your sport in 4 years.
Yeah, like in tennis, when the top players get an injury and then they drop like right back down, and you get these like top players, but then they come back and their ranking's like 500 or something, and this guy's not fought for 4 years, and they're like, oh well, you can stay at number 2. It's fine. You're your performance probably won't decline at all, given the fact you're 45 years old and you're 4 years inactive. You'll probably be better for the rest.
Do you know what? It makes me feel like I'm probably ranked like in the WBA somewhere.
We should make that a challenge. We should try and get your world rank. We could create a page on the Box Rec, which is the one that does it, and see if we can get you like actually a ranking.
That would be quite. There we go. There's a challenge for the podcast. Get Ryan a world ranking.
You might be like Rio Ferdinand, and they'll be like, nah. We might need you. Are you willing to move to a Central American country to make this happen?
Possibly. I could change my name to like Ryan Garcia.
You do speak a little bit of Spanish.
I do. I speak very bad Spanish, just like a lot of these guys.
Oh man. So I guess we can see where we're going with this. So this is the first and original, and supposed to be the kind of pillar of boxing, and we've kind of highlighted some problems with the ranking process. Moving on to the WBC.
Yep.
Founded in Mexico City in 1963, and was involved in the establishment of basically an international regulating body who were responsible for introducing some of the safety measures now included in boxing, including the reduction of rounds from 15 to 12 as a maximum, and the introduction of the standing 8 count. Which
basically means that if you are stunned or whatever, you can also, as a boxer, take a knee at any point, and you get 8 seconds to kind of regain yourself before you fight, which is quite safe. So it means that if you're getting absolutely pummeled and you take a knee, the ref will step in, push you back, and then you get a standing 8 count. Stop you from maybe continuing on in a way or getting hurt.
Our favourite boxer from last week's podcast famously took a knee when he was trying to reassemble his eye socket.
Did he?
He did.
Kel Brook, Mr. Paper Mache eye socket.
I think he took a knee against Errol Spence. I think Errol Spence Jr., who's another one of the pound for pound best, or vying to be considered one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world. It's actually a really good fight, but he took a knee because he couldn't see.
Well, that happens usually when your eye socket collapses.
Oh man, I shouldn't have mentioned it. We're going down this route again. Anyway, so the WBC have done something similar to the WBA in terms of having like different kind of categories of champion as well. So you have like a silver champion, which is a replacement for what used to be the interim title, and you have a diamond champion, which is like the award or the winner of a historic fight. They award it kind of to say, well done, that was well good. But again, the silver, if you see WBC preceding silver, then that's kind of like a much like lesser. It's not the legitimate full-blown world championship. It's the kind of lesser award one. So again, it's just if you're seeing them to then go, okay, what does that actually mean? I guess the clue's in silver rather than platinum or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, I looked into this as well. At the moment, these guys have 12 silver champions, 14 international, and 1 diamond. In total, they've got 43 champions.
Mm-hmm.
When you're considering you've got 17 weight classes.
I was thinking about this, and it's one of these things that, it's a kind of like, not to sound on a kind of different rant that I sometimes go on, but it's like the evolution of kind of consumerism as things get like ever more like subdivided to kind of create illusions of value. It seems like the governing bodies for boxing have kind of adopted this approach where they're just kind of like splintering everything out until they're like extracting every bit of value and like kind of crushing everyone's soul like to saturation. It seems to be that's their approach.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's also like I don't want to accuse any of these sanctioning bodies of racketeering, but like, this is a racket to raise sanctioning fees. Basically, is to if you can say, oh yeah, or like put more importance on a fight. So you can say, oh, it's for a silver belt, and it's like, all right, okay, and because it's murky and no one really understands what it means, they're like, oh, it's for a silver belt. It just gets you something, and no doubt they take a higher percentage of the purse for a silver than they do like just a regular fight.
The kind of combat against this is knowledge,
which we are providing you in Oodles, listeners.
Exactly. So it's about understanding that what if any value is attached to these different things should then kind of make the thing more transparent, and maybe kind of it would then devalue them doing it effectively. If everyone knew that it doesn't really carry much value, then there's no point in having this continual like splintering of different funky coloured belts, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So
they're not without controversy, obviously.
They're not without controversy. Did your research come across the rather hysterical controversy about Roy Jones Jr.?
With Rocco Gianni.
Yeah. This is beyond belief.
Yeah, you wouldn't get it in any other sports, because they basically, like, these sanctioning bodies have like pages, encyclopedias of regulations that they have to follow, and they broke a number of them with this Roy Jones Jr. case.
They certainly did. So as I understand it, in 1998 he was the light heavyweight champion, and he relinquished his title, and the WBC then authorized a fight, or the fight was set between two different challengers to then crown a new champion, and the new champion was crowned. What was his pronunciation? What was the name?
It's Rocco Gianni.
Very nice. And he won the fight between the two challengers, and after he won, Roy Jones Jr. said, "Actually, can I have my belt back?" and the WBC said, "Yeah." And they then told, what's his job?
Rocco Gianni.
They then told him that the authorization of him, the awarding the belt to him, was in fact a typographical error, and he wasn't really the champion after all. And it was going back to Roy Jones Jr.
Yeah.
Which then
and he then, like, this guy Rocco Gianni got a bit pissed off by it. Like, he was like, I don't know if that's really fair. And he was like, do you know what? I'm probably thinking that this is due like some legal action, because Roy Jones Jr. shouldn't have my belt because he gave his up and I fought for it, which, like, it makes sense. And he actually won. He sued for $30 million and the judge upheld it, which actually could have completely ended the WBC. They would have been completely bankrupt by this whole thing. And anybody who likes the WBC, they owe this guy Rocco Gianni a huge thank you, because a number of boxers went to this guy and said, look, is there something you can work out? Because if you take this 30 million, WBC will no longer exist. And he then settled for a 6-figure sum.
Very honourable.
I mean, that's extremely honourable, because the thing is, who knows who Rocco Gianni is? We've got a podcast, you can't even pronounce his name.
I was doing that for comedic effect, thank you very much.
Yeah, I know, but you know what I mean? Like no one knows who this guy is, and he actually is the savior of the WBC, because they did something pretty suspect, and he then was very honourable and settled for a measly 6 figures.
Measly. Well, I suppose it is in comparison to 8. But what I find extraordinary about, well, there's a lot of things that are totally extraordinary about that, but the idea that no one kind of did a kind of analysis to say what do we think is going to happen if we just give Roy Jones Jr. back his belt and take away this guy and then say it was a typo and he didn't get it. I mean, did they not think, well, no one sort of went, he might sue us, you know?
Well, you know, the thing is, we're in 1999, or 1998. You would have thought that it was quite a litigious time in the United States as well.
100%. I understand that these organisations are like, you know, full of lawyers and stuff. There's, you know, there's more lawyers than you can shake a stick at, and none of them think, well, you know, he might just get a lawyer to sue the shit out of us if we do this, because he's gonna be well pissed off. You know, it's just I can't, just the lack of like foresight about it. I mean, it's just it's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, it is indeed. But if there's one good thing we can say about the WBC, right?
Go on.
Is they introduced the clean boxing program.
Okay.
Which, for all of its flaws, means that there is some level of anti-doping. How effective that is, it remains to be seen. But at least they're attempting to clean up the sport from performance-enhancing drugs. Saul Canelo. No, he ate tainted meat. And he also took performance-enhancing drugs.
Here, that's not true. We're not saying that's true, because it'll be great if we get like 50 listeners and one of them is going to sue us. And then, not him, but like, I don't think you can say people definitely have taken performance-enhancing drugs. I think you have to say that they definitely haven't, and that was definitely a joke.
That was a joke.
It was a joke.
It's not been proved.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. In terms of their ranking, I thought there's a kind of current quirk just to highlight with them. I don't know if you saw this as well, but for the WBC, they've got Dillian Whyte, obviously the British heavyweight fighter, as their number one ranked fighter. So in theory, he should then be the mandatory fighter to fight for the title, which is held by Deontay Wilder.
Yes, and you know, I'm pretty sure after he won his last fight against a guy named Lucas Brown, who, please go look this up, because he does look like when Homer Simpson tried to box that one time. He looks a lot like it, and Dillian Whyte like won comprehensively. But this was like caged as making him a mandatory fight for Deontay Wilder, but that still hasn't happened, and he has to do an eliminator, and now he's fighting Joseph Parker, which seems very strange
because it's not the eliminator. But the weird thing about it was WBC had said, well, in their rankings, Dillian Whyte is the number one ranked fighter, but our number two ranked fighter is now the mandatory challenger for the belt. So. Deontay Wilder has to fight Dominic Breazeale, and it's kind of like, you've got the rankings, so if you want him to fight that guy, at least make that guy number one, but you've got the rankings, like, you're not even adhering to your own system. Why would you say he's got to fight number two when number one wants to fight him? It's just totally inconsistent. There's no logic attached to it whatsoever. No. To say, so it's just, I guess, to highlight that they all have their particular quirks, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Moving on, IBF, founded in 1976 as the United States Boxing Association, and based on the withdrawal of American members from the WBA, an organisation founded with the mission of unbiased rankings.
Indeed. Which is quite ironic. In a way, because the founder of the IBF is a guy named Bob Lee, who was convicted in 1999 of racketeering and taking bribes for rating fighters.
I don't think we're doing a very good job of promoting boxing to a wider audience.
I think we are. I think what we're doing is I would like to believe that we're opening people's eyes to the fact that, this does exist in the sport. And it's not ideal. and there are problems with the sport, which I think we can open up. And I think the more people who are aware of these problems might actually do the sport some good. But there is like a bit of a tragedy involved there, where you have an organization that's set up with a mission to be unbiased, and then the guy who sets it up is done for taking bribes.
I've got my head in my hands. I don't know what to say. It's just like... It's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. You understand? When people are just like, I don't want anything to do with this. Remember, guys, it's a shit charity shop.
It's a shit charity shop run by Sepp Blatter.
Sepp Blatter's charity shop. Oh, man.
Oh, Christ. All right, okay. And then, I think it's also important to say that it took a while for the IBF to gain a level of legitimacy, but they worked quite hard by setting up rankings and fights for American fighters, which helped them get American fighters to get big belts, which meant that their sanctioning body actually, held some clout. And they also highlighted a bit that, I kind of brought up earlier, that in fact a lot of the other sanctioning bodies, especially at this time, were they were favoring Latin American fighters, and it does still kind of go on today. And they were trying to redress this and help American fighters, which through a mission it is good. It's just maybe the execution was slightly poor.
Fair enough. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth and final of the major organisations is the WBO, World Boxing Organization, founded in 1988 in Puerto Rico. And that one also struggled for over a couple of decades, really, in terms of establishing itself as like a legitimate body. And then, as far as I'm aware, in 2012, Japan kind of took the step to Japanese Boxing Commission took the step to kind of consider them as legitimate, and others follow suit. And then from there, they've kind of established themselves as a kind of equal member of the big four, if you like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's quite interesting as well. It was actually a bit of a breakaway. It was a breakaway organization from the WBA. Mm-hmm. So there were actually, I think there were a bunch of lawyers actually that just kind of, they didn't like the way the WBA were doing things, and so they went, okay, well, we're going to go set up our own sanctioning body that's a bit more clean, and has less regulations, and they're good actually in terms of their champions at the moment. Mm-hmm. They have 16 champions, right? And because one of them is actually vacant, so they don't have any of these silly other belts.
Okay, so are we saying that they're our current favorite? Are we allowed to do that?
I would say that I do like the way the WBO does things, because they're not throwing in these silly other ones. But is that because they're a smaller sanctioning body, perhaps?
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. There was also, I don't know if it's worth mentioning, there's the IBO in terms of a body, but it's not really considered legit. The only thing you need to know about it is that you don't need to know about it.
Yeah. If someone has an IBO belt, then other boxers don't really care about it. I think Chris Eubank,
he won. He
won an IBO, yeah, and like, I think that kind of goes to show that, in fact, like, it doesn't really matter, because when he was fighting, he threw this belt up on the line, like, no one really cared that he had this belt.
So, yeah, I think that's fine. That's all we need to kind of talk about in regards to that one. I suppose the other thing to mention is there is the Ring magazine, who have belts for each of the champions, and the idea is that they're effectively identifying a singular best champion at that weight division. Mm-hmm. That was the notion of the Ring magazine, and I'm sure, Ryan, your research is the same as mine has come across. There is only a potential conflict of interest that's occurred with regards to the Ring magazine ownership.
Oh, do you mean Oscar De La Hoya?
Yes. Yeah.
So, obviously Golden Boy Golden Boy Promotions is his company. Oscar De La Hoya is a very, very famous boxer, and
boxer turned promoter.
Boxer turned promoter, and so they purchased this magazine, and you could imagine that if you own a magazine, you might rank your fighters slightly higher.
Mm-hmm. So we can kind of, I think, to be honest, I've never read it. I don't know what it's like in terms of its content, but the fact that it's so like it's obviously going to be explicitly favouring certain fighters, it kind of makes it a little bit redundant. So, and then there was the idea that there should be. So we have a lineal champion, which was set up by the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board in 2012, and that was the idea. That's a voluntary organisation. The idea behind it is that it's respected, like journalists and people within the industry who are identifying a best or a top champion in each of the weight divisions to say this is the numero uno at said weight. And it's awarded like basically if there's two top fighters fight each other, then they'll say, okay, well, the result of this fight means that this fighter A is now the lineal champion for this division.
Indeed, and just as a slight aside, you'll hear Tyson Fury say that he's the lineal champion. He's the lineal heavyweight champion.
You will.
And that is not the case.
It's not the case. It's absolutely not the case. He was.
He was, but now he's not, because Vitaly Klitschko has fought Anthony Joshua now. And so it would mean that Anthony Joshua would have to fight Tyson Fury in order for one of them to be called a lineal champion. There is not a lineal champion in the heavyweight division at the moment, no matter how many times Tyson Fury says it.
But what I find interesting with that is that when people interviewing him, if they're trying to like suck his balls as a sort of precursor to the interview, they say the current lineal champion, and he's not. I don't understand that. Why don't
I think it's in his rider. I think it's the only thing I can imagine is that you have to like mention lineal champion. Because otherwise, right, and also to give some level of legitimacy to the person you're speaking to, because otherwise you're saying, I'm interviewing this fat guy who used to box quite well.
That's how I'd start my interview with him. I'd be Tyson Fury, fat boy who used to box quite well. How are you this week?
That's what, when we finally get him on the podcast, that's how we'll introduce it.
We will. No respect.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about with the sanctioning bodies?
No, just to recap then, there's four main ones, and it's really only that you're looking at who is effectively the top belt holding within each of those four sanctioning bodies, and you stick with that, then it's a world champion. And some of them will be stronger than others, but at least you can then say we're looking at the legitimate world champion. So that should be like the takeaway from this section.
Yeah, and for people who are kind of new to boxing and or maybe know of Anthony Joshua, so Anthony Joshua holds all of the belts besides the WBC belt, which is currently held by Deontay Wilder, and that's why they want to make this fight, because he would then be able to say he held all the belts and he is the undisputed champion of the heavyweight division.
Exactly. I think we mentioned it earlier on, but just to recap, because it gets banded about a bit, we're talking about a unified champion. To like a lay person, you would say unified. That kind of means it would sort of intuitively mean all, but it doesn't. So unified means that you hold the WBA belt plus one of the three others. Mm-hmm. That's unified, and undisputed is obviously when you hold them all. But so that's just something to watch out for when you're talking about, what does it mean? What does actually unified mean? It's to do with somehow attributing WBA as more valuable than the others somehow. Because if you had like the IBF and the WBC, you wouldn't be unified. Whereas if you hold the WBA plus one other, then you are unified. So it's kind of like a little bit of a difference in, maybe they've got like copyright on unified or something, like a patent on unified.
Trademark,
unified. Only relating to WBA.
Yeah. So cool. So now, I think it's time to move on to everybody's favorite segment of What Grinds My Gears.
You know what really grinds my gears?
Would you like to go first?
I would like to go first because this has been bothering me all week, right? I want to talk about boxing on television, and this is both free to air, pay-per-view, whatever, right? As someone who wants to watch the sport, the boxing promoters make it quite difficult for me to know when the fights are on.
I will say that actually I do agree because as someone else that wants to watch boxing, you do have to do a bit of legwork to find, which seems intuitively not correct, to try and find out when actually it's on, who's showing, etc. It's not made easy. There's nowhere where it's easy.
It's not made easy. Like, even like when you go on to like the BBC, they have a boxing schedule of fights that are coming up. That's not comprehensive at all.
That it's so far from being. I'm not particularly having to go to the BBC because I do go on their website like quite often per hour. But the boxing schedule is just like it's not even a token gesture.
No, it's not at all. And so last week, David Haye now has his Haymaker Promotions company, and he has a tie-in with Dave, free to air. And I came across the end of this fight night by utter chance. So one of the fighters is a guy named Joe Joyce, who's supposed to be like the next Anthony Joshua, up and coming heavyweight. So why are you not trying to get people to watch this fight, David Haye? Why do I need to come across it and then try and download it like later to watch the fight? What is wrong with these people? Last night there was a fight, Josh Taylor. It was on Channel 5. I came across it by utter chance that it was going to be on, and I ended up watching it. It was a very, very good fight. It would be a great fight for people to watch, a Scottish fighter do well in Glasgow. Why are they not trying to promote these things? This is what these boxers take, they give a cut of their purse to these guys for promoting their fights. And, it's impossible to try and navigate this and actually watch it. If you're watching two low-end Premier League teams, right, on Super Sunday, God knows that the PR guys behind it have been like, yeah, we're going to call this the cross-country derby, they make up some ridiculous reason why it's a grudge match. Why is boxing not catching up with the rest of the sports? Unless you're Eddie Hearn.
I'm inclined to agree. I think it's a bit. They're not. It doesn't seem to be that they're doing enough to kind of to promote, and it's just like, oh, we'll put it on, especially the free to air stuff. Like, it should be, that they're really trying to drive traffic towards it, and don't think of it as just like another part of their programming, because there is an audience to be captured there. And like you're saying, the fight last night, the Josh Taylor fight, was like a world class fight. It was a world level fight. He's an up and coming fighter, and the guy's fighting is like a proven elite level fighter. So, and he wasn't like way sort of damaged goods over the head or anything. He was still basically in his prime, and it was super competitive, super entertaining. It was a brilliant fight, and to be able to watch it for free is fantastic. So. Totally. But the fact is that people won't have come across it. People will have missed it, even though that would have enjoyed it and that would have watched it. It's really sad.
100%, and it is sad. And it went 12 rounds. It was close. It was a very close fight, I thought. I mean, my girlfriend was watching it with me, and she was like, "This is actually one of the most intense fights you've ever made me watch." And it was a good fight to watch. And so, to have that opportunity, why, I don't know if it's just Barry McGuigan that's fallen down here, if it's Channel 5 that's fallen down as well, but they need to fix this, because if there is free to air rugby or football on, about it. So why can boxing not be the same? That is my rant for the week, and I know it's not going to get fixed until we get Eddie Hearn on the show and speak to Eddie Hearn about it. But
I don't think he's going to say anything particularly helpful to people trying to get free to air boxing.
I think what he'll say is, what you need is a Sky Sports subscription.
Like, the way to fix this, right, is a pay-per-view event. That's how we fix this. Like, what? That's not what we're talking about. Why did not it? No, pay-per-view. That's the way to go.
So tell me,
grinds,
Andy, what grinds your gears?
You know what really grinds my gears?
Well, do you remember last week I went on a lot about Tyson Fury?
Did you? I've actually been bamming him up on our new Twitter this week, actually. If anybody wants to follow us, it's at Boxing Unwrapped, and you can see that I've been bamming up Tyson Fury this week quite a lot, because he drives me wild too.
Not in the good way. Have we had? Well, at one point, I'm going to have to understand what Twitter actually is. But does he have the opportunity to respond to us? And he's not taking it.
He does. He just hasn't taken it yet. Yet. But I think I'm going to work on it.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm happy to participate in that as well. I feel like I've got like a vested interest in this.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, last week I was. What grinds my gears was Tyson Fury, and I think I was pretty comprehensive. So this week I'm going to do something entirely different.
Okay.
I'm going to do a lot of other stuff about Tyson Fury that I forgot to mention in the first episode.
Please. All right. Okay. Should we just have a Tyson Fury like bash corner?
I think unless something happens in the interim, that next week I am almost at the point of promising that I won't talk about Tyson Fury in this section. I'm not quite there yet.
Okay.
But I think it's unlikely that I'll make a third part about what grinds my gears Tyson Fury. I'm not committing to that yet, but I think as it stands now, I'm going to move on to a different topic as of next week.
Okay, this sounds good. I'm excited.
Okay, good. It'll be even better. So I think the first thing that we could mention was the spectacular event that was his comeback fight. That was good. Huh? That was some real good pantomime.
That was. Do you know what the best part of that fight was?
When it was over?
No, when the fight
broke
out in the crowd.
The crowd.
There was a fight that broke out in the crowd, and both him and this like numpty that he was fighting turned around and watched it.
They're like, oh, we should be doing that.
Totally.
They were looking for pointers.
It was just the worst fight I've ever seen. And like, how he can take any legitimacy, of course, maybe take an easier fight on your comeback fight. But I mean, mate, what was that?
And the
people
thing
paid
is that
good money for that.
People
by the way.
paid. I know they did. I know. And the thing was that he did everything he could to kind of ham it up. I mean, it was like WWF or whatever, like the way he was behaving. He made it as much of a pantomime as he could. I thought it was actually completely disrespectful for the people that had paid good money, not the ones that had only gone there to fight in the crowd, but the ones who were actually interested in the boxing would have been like, why have I paid money to have this guy just goof around for 4 rounds? It's just ridiculous.
Totally. And, as well, like, the guy gave up. The guy that was fighting just gave up. He wasn't hurt in any way. He just gave up. So, that's even more ridiculous, So, I think that, okay, he was never going to win the fight against Tyson Fury because neither of them were actually fighting at all. In any way that I've ever seen a boxing match. It was an exhibition spar more than anything.
It really was. And if you paid however much ringside seats were for that, I think you'd be sorely disappointed.
I think I would have gone in there. If I'd paid that much for that, I would have wrapped my hands and gone in and tried to fight Tyson Fury myself.
Well, you are actually the right kind of height for him to fight.
I am, totally. I think I'm
if
a bit
anything,
tall.
you might be a bit rangy, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit tall for him. Honestly, like... but I think it is a shame actually that was even allowed to happen.
I do. It was a joke. It was embarrassing. So what else has happened that I didn't mention in the previous rant? So after all this chat about fighting Bellew, he's now come out saying, actually, no, I'm not going to fight Bellew because it doesn't help me at all, which is what we all knew was going to be the case anyway. And he was never going to fight Bellew, but now he's come out and said, oh, no, I won't fight Bellew. As from adopting.
Do you know what he also said this week? I saw it. He said Tony Bellew's too small. Tony Bellew, by the way, guys, is like, he's 6 foot, right? He's a cruiserweight, so he's a light, he's not a natural heavyweight. He's a bit lighter, so he falls into the category that Andy was talking about last week. That the type of person that Tyson Fury usually fights is a smaller heavyweight, and Tony Bellew, I think, is a good fighter. He's a good prize fighter. So he's the perfect type of person that would go up against Tyson Fury for a good match. But I think Tyson Fury would struggle. I think he'd really struggle.
I think now he would struggle. I think if he was fit and back to his inverted commas best, I think he would. I think he would be too big for him to get near him. But just now he wouldn't fight him. There's no way to fight him. Even if Bellew likes a payday. Bellew is like
he loves a payday.
I like it the money. I like it the money.
Totally.
It's like he won his belt, and now he's just like, who can I wind up that's going to get me the most amount of money?
Totally.
Bellew would fight his shadow if there was a payday in it, honestly. His is like a sort of NBA thesis. Like, it's just, the Bellew approach to fight matching is amazing.
But the thing is, though, right? Like, it's not like he hides it.
No, I know.
Which I kind of totally respect. He says, like, I'm a prize fighter. He's like, I don't really care about belts. I just want a payday so that I can retire relatively young and give my kids loads of money, which I think is admirable.
It's good. It's totally reasonable. So obviously that's not going to happen now, which is what he's saying. He's still banging on about fighting for a world title by the end of the year, which, as I spoke about in the last week's episode, is impossible because there isn't anyone with a belt that's going to be available for him to fight this year.
IBO?
That Joshua's got it, I think. Joshua's does, yeah. Is that right?
Yeah, he does.
So maybe they could force a mandatory challenge or something. I don't know, the IBO. I don't know what kind of clout they've got. Dear God. I watched one of the interviews he gave when he was at Windsor Park. So he's fighting, maybe not everyone will know, but he's fighting on the undercard for Carl Frampton in August when he's fighting in the Northern Ireland football ground, Windsor Park. So he's fighting on the undercard of that one. And he's talking, I saw him in this interview from Windsor Park, and he was saying at the start of the interview, he said after his fight, the day after, at a celebratory barbecue, he drank 6 or 7 bottles of wine.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
And then at the end of the interview, which was only like 7 or 8 minutes long, he then said, so keen to get back in the gym. I had like 3 bottles of beer and that was it. So I've come to the conclusion that I think Tyson Fury might be part goldfish. So I actually don't think he remembered what he'd said at the first part, which would be more in line with if he drank 6 or 7 bottles of wine. But so this is illustrating the point about him saying stuff without any basis of reality. Because they can't both be true. Probably neither of them are true, but they definitely can't both be true. But he's saying 2 contradictory things within the space of 7 or 8 minutes. So no wonder within the space of 24 hours he can completely turn his story around because he can't remember, the course of an interview, what he said. So so what chance has he got the next day? It's just like clean slate starting it. Anyway. Yeah. The other thing that I thought was worth interesting, and I guess possibly be careful with this, is I guess highlight a little bit about what happened with regards to his drugs ban, because I think it's quite interesting, and I don't remember at the time even finding a lot of interesting or a lot of proper information regarding what happened. So I guess for the listeners that don't, I think everyone's kind of heard that he got some drugs ban, and they're like, well, what happened in the end? And the fundamental thing to remember about this is that he was not acquitted. He was found guilty, and in this context of like a lot of legal wrangling, which was costing the body an awful lot of money. UCAD had a huge amount of
UCAD were really
legal
struggling.
fees. They were struggling with legal fees, etc. And this was like kind of entrenched legal conflict. And he's got big time lawyers, etc. So they decided that without saying it was absolving him of any responsibility, they said, we'll come to an agreement where you have a backdated 2-year ban for taking nandrolone, which is one of the most widely used performance-enhancing drugs. Yeah. So the first thing is to say, he was never found innocent. He was found guilty, and they came to an agreement about the length of the ban. So there was him and also his cousin, who's also has fought for the world championship, Hughie Fury. He was also given a ban that was contested while it was ongoing, and he was actually fighting throughout that period rather than Tyson Fury, who became inactive due to the widely publicised mental health, alcohol problems that he had. Mm-hmm. Hughie Fury served the ban, or didn't serve the ban, but came to the agreement about what happened because he failed the test. Tyson Fury was not able to compete during the period, even if he wanted to, because he not only failed a test in February of 2014, he refused in September 2016 to give another sample when he was asked. I think he was still like registered and licensed as a boxer, therefore he can still be asked for samples, and he refused to give a sample in September 2016, which is something I don't know if I remember knowing that at the time, but anyway, that's what happened. And his reasoning for not giving them the sample in 2016, September 2016, was because...
Was it because he took steroids?
Well,
allegedly.
That certainly wasn't his defense. His defense was that because they delayed pressing charges against him, he didn't know that he had charges brought against him until very shortly before he was asked to give a sample, and also because he didn't know that by refusing to give a sample, it would lead to a 4-year ban. That was his argument for not giving a sample.
Right. Okay.
So, but the one part of that to say, well, I didn't give you a sample because I didn't know how severe the punishment was for not giving you a sample. It's not, for me, it's not like the argument of a pure white, clear, no possibility of any guilt or wrongdoing. It's not that kind of person who would give that kind of response. It's like, if you have nothing to hide, unless you think they're going to rig your sample, why would you not give them a sample if you're 100% sure you're clear? Why would you refuse to give a sample? It surely at least raises the question that he knew he wasn't going to be clear at that point.
Exactly.
It at least makes it a bit murky.
It does make it murky. It does.
I think I'm not going to get into it much more, but I think the whole thing around what happened there was quite interesting. His reasoning, in case anyone isn't aware, for saying that he had tested positive for nandrolone was because he had eaten uncastrated wild boar. Do you know what? That's always my worry when I eat uncastrated wild boar, is that I'm going to fail drugs tests for synthetic testosterone. I mean, I've cut down my uncastrated animal consumption by really substantial quantities on the back of being concerned about the then performance enhancing drugs that are then floating around my system. Exactly. So that was his reason. He said either the rearing of the wild boar had been given supplements for growth rate, which is sounding a bit similar to someone else who perhaps might be recently serving a ban. Do we like the parallel there? That's interesting. I do like the parallel, yeah. But Fury's argument was, well, either the person rearing the wild boar has given it supplements for growth, or because it's uncastrated, these substances are naturally high in it, which there's some... I don't know enough about the science. It was really difficult to properly we would need to get like a proper scientist on to go through this. But I think it's not theoretically impossible for uncastrated animals to then to then leave these traces in your system after consumption. Right, but whether or not... I'm worried about, right? Okay, so here's the thing. Then why are not all athletes smashing tons of uncastrated animals in order to fix this system? Whether or not they're taking performance enhancing drugs, which a lot of them do, or it must have some sort of anabolic effect. So why are we not all going out and eating loads of uncastrated animals in order to boost our muscle mass? It's a good question. It is a good question, because I think it's a load of bullshit. I think if you are a scientist that has any idea about this, please get in contact, boxing.unwrapped@gmail.com, and tell us whether or not that this is just total bullshit. Because I'm happy to admit that I'm wrong, and I'm happy to apologise to Tyson Fury if I am wrong. And we'll eat some uncastrated wild boar on air. Oh, you know it. I'll be eating it all day long. As way of an apology. Yeah, exactly. I'm just worried about what it's going to do to my body. Well, you might just get a bit more hench. I don't know what that means. It's what young people call people who have got lots of muscles. Oh, I could do with some of that. Yeah. So there we go. The only last comment I would make is nothing to do with that, but the other thing is, just to say that over the past number of years, he's come out with comments that are, in various points, anti-Semitic, homophobic, and wildly sexist. So and then he goes, "Oh, I was only joking." So I'm just saying, are we painting a picture of a spectacular character? I'm just saying there's more reasons than just the shite he talks to be a bit wary about what he's doing. Anyway, totally. I think that's enough. I think it's enough for me.
It's enough Tyson Fury bashing for just now, but I'm sure we'll come back to it next week.
It's not the end, Tyson. You're getting it, pal.
You're getting it, pal.
Only like, audio wise, only like a bit of banter. I'm not gonna come and see you or anything. We might do some tweets though.
Yeah, I'll heavy do some tweets, and little did you know, but I actually am a semi-regular champion in the WBA at a number of weights. So that might help. That might help.
It's good.
It is good. I'm the right size for him. So.
Could be. What are you doing in August? Is it August 18th? Is it maybe
August 18th? Well, there's a little thing that I haven't told you yet, Andy. I'm actually the guy that Tyson Fury's fighting.
I think I've made my point. I hope I've made my point, and I hope we had fun.
We did have fun. Did the listeners? Who knows? Who knows?
Listener,
the one. Thank you, Murray Deans.
Yeah, he'll definitely tune in next week because he's getting bummed up big time.
Totally.
Hi, Murray.
Oh yeah, totally. Here you go, guys. Right. If anybody tweets us, we'll give you a shout out next week.
Unless this show goes through the stratosphere, but it's unlikely within the week it will. But I don't want to promise something we can't. Well, actually, no. Let's say we'll do it.
That's it. We could do it in a whole episode where we just read out people the tweet.
It'll be a lot more concise than the current format.
And probably have a lot more to do with boxing. Right.
True.
Cool. So I think that's probably a good place to stop. So just to remind everybody, please go onto iTunes, subscribe, Boxing Unwrapped, tell your friends, tell your mum, tell your girlfriend, just tell everybody. And so it's goodbye from me, Ryan.
And goodbye from me, Andrew.